Okay, continuing the build-up to the All-Ireland Senior Football Championship final, I was passing through bits and pieces of Kerry this afternoon, a beautiful drive from the Fireys over towards on Gaeltacht now, but I was passing through Annascaul and I said I have to stop in the South Pole Inn, of all places, and the man who runs the place at the moment, and for the last nearly quarter of a century, I think, as well, it's fair to say, is Gary Percival. Gary, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, very well, yeah.
Tom Crean pops into my mind all the time. He's one of my heroes, but I think for a lot of people he's a hero, and I guess he popped into my mind for this piece on All-Ireland Final Week because we had Micheál Murhertig on the show a couple of years ago and he was raving and ranting about Tom as probably one of Kerry's greatest ever people. His legend just lives on, isn't it? I think it's actually 61 years today since he died, someone was telling me, so it's quite unique to be here today.
Yeah, it's very, I'd say Tom is known for the fact that he was, a hero, but also his determination. So that's what we want. Kerry people are tough people. Let's just put it that way. So yeah, so we're hoping for the best on Sunday.
Absolutely. So the running of the pub was from 1999, I think. I know Tom Crean obviously ran the pub for years up until 1927. Well, 11 years, I guess, until his death. But
yeah.
How did your interest and I guess ownership of the pub come about? Were you obsessed with Tom Crean yourself? Was it just a happy coincidence, or how did it all happen?
No. My mother's from the village of Annascaul. She immigrated when she was young, and she always wanted to come back. So she came back in '99. I came back with her, took over the pub, and just been here ever since. Really, in fact, this year I'll have been in Ireland longer than I was in England. So yeah,
have you always been fascinated by the Tom Crean story yourself?
It's a brilliant story. Once I learned, when we took over, I learned the story inside out, and it's just fascinating. The things that he did, and he didn't talk about it very much. He just kept going, and he was determined all the way through his expeditions. So yeah.
When you think of, I guess, his life and times, like leaving this village of Annascaul at the age of 15, I think, joins the Royal Navy and ends up, 15,000 kilometres away from here in the Antarctic. Like that, the lifespan and story. It's, I guess, when you visit Annascaul, you realise the scale of what he achieved elsewhere.
Yeah, I think you've got to remember that he must have seen so much of the world travelling with the Navy, but also then in Antarctica, and then he was in South America, and then to come back to the village he came from and run a pub. It's just like, it was my dream when I was young to run a pub, so that I always felt a connection that way. Yeah, so yeah, it's great.
Do you know if it was always his plan to come back and run the pub, or was that something that just happened by coincidence when he came back, or was it always a dream of his, I guess?
I don't really know that one. I know that he always wanted to come back to the village. I think, as far as I'm aware, the connection is his wife's family were publicans in the village as well. So I think she had the publican bug. She ran the pub really when they had it. So she was the one that pulled the pints and ran the pub. So yeah.
There are even stories like everyone knows. A lot of people, I guess, will be familiar with the story of Endurance and the 92 days drifting on the ice, and Tom's rescue efforts. But maybe just describe us exactly what exactly happened, how it all came about, and why Tom Crean is the hero he is to so many people today.
Well, the Endurance expedition was really only half of Tom Crean's story, but in itself, you've got to remember he's already done 2 expeditions at this stage. He's become sort of a senior member of Shackleton's crew, and then the boat got stuck in the ice, and I suppose keeping the morale up and things like that was Shackleton's expertise. He kept all the men safe, and then when they had to abandon the ship when it crushed, they had to wait for the ice to recede. Launched the 3 lifeboats they'd salvaged from the ship, and then travelled to Elephant Island, which was a small little island that had nothing on it really, just elephant seals. And then they had to make the harsh decision to travel then on, to South Georgia, which was another small island, but they knew there were men on that island, and that was the important part. And really what saved them then was they had a man called McNeish. He was the carpenter, and he built the boat up, which was the lifeboat, the James Caird, which we have a replica here in the pub. And 6 of the men climbed inside and headed off in this tiny little lifeboat in some of the worst seas in the world, taking them over 16 days to travel the 800 miles to South Georgia. And even then, when they made it to South Georgia, they got stuck in a storm and they couldn't land, and then the rudder fell off the boat and they couldn't land on the right side of the island. They had to land on the opposite side of the island. And then, when they got off that, they realised there was a mountain range that they had to cross. And even that, you've just been through all of that, and then they have to climb across this mountain to get to rescue. But they made it, they did it, and that was probably one of the most epic journeys on a small lifeboat that anybody's ever done in the world.
Like, it's quite ironic that the ship's named Endurance, because the feat of strength and fitness and endurance that Tom Crean embarked on, I mean, it probably beggars belief nowadays.
Yeah, you just can't understand. You wouldn't, we're not tough enough now. We wouldn't endure the first week, let alone months and months of it. So, but to go back 3 times, I mean, they must have had a little bit of a I don't know, sense of. They wanted to achieve something, didn't they? They wanted to be the first to do something, so that was why they kept going back, I suppose. So yeah.
Am I right in saying Tom was kicking ball on the ice as well at different points, keeping the morale up and himself, I suppose?
Well, the story goes that Tom was the man that sang the songs really badly. He was a terrible singer, but never stopped singing. So yeah, keep singing a few Irish tunes and stuff like that, keeping the morale high. Yeah. So yeah.
Was the Michael Smith book, an unsung hero, that seems to be a turning point in the Tom Crean story, in that decades since he passed away, but the interest levels, all of a sudden people are like, Jesus, this guy's story is quite amazing. You have the play and stuff now as well, so yeah. he's more into popular culture, I guess, now as well.
Yeah, definitely. The Michael Smith book sort of coincided up with us taking over. It was roughly the same time that we took over here at the pub, and I would be we only had a brief knowledge of what Tom had done before that, and we were telling the story, but then the Michael Smith book came out, and it was like opening our eyes to the things that he did. Even his daughters didn't know half the things that he did on some, the 35-mile solo march and things like that. I mean, he saved so many men's lives.
And I guess the endurance being found, was it last year or quite very recently, in fact. So this is brought up after 107 years, and I guess that again brings the story into public consciousness.
Yeah, it does. And I mean, we actually had one of the directors of that expedition that found the endurance here last month, and he was saying that people who go to the Antarctic know about Tom Crean. That his story is one of the most amazing stories. Everyone knows Shackleton, everyone knows Scott and Amundsen, but they don't. Tom Crean's story is bigger than all of theirs, really. So yeah.
I remember reading the great Dublin footballer Brian Mullins talking before about how Tom Crean was his hero, and all he wanted to do was read up and hear the stories. And I guess this week of all weeks we remember all the great Kerry footballers of old. But I mean, where does Tom Crean rank in terms of the greatest Kerry people of all time? Surely, given the story that we've heard in the 35-mile trek, as you say, he's up there.
He has to be, really, but more than that is that he didn't boast about it. He knew what he'd done. People knew what he'd done, but he didn't talk about it. He wasn't, big-headed or anything like that. He was just loved by people. As far as I can work out, there was thousands of people turned up for his funeral and things like that. So it was just like, he must have been a character, and I would have loved to have met him. So yeah.
There are plenty of bits and bobs, even looking around the pub here. I mean, you have so many pieces of memory. I wonder if I can turn that around just slightly to show people a taster of some of the things you've got. Like, has it been a decades-long process to get these bits and bobs of Tom Crean, I guess, memorabilia?
Yes, it has, of course. Yeah, most of the photos on the wall come from the Scots Polar Research Institute in Cambridge. We have some from the National Geographic. They're from the original slides. So, I mean, they preserve the memory of what the men did and things like that, as well as reading the books. The pictures are very good for teaching the children. They understand. We can all say it was cold, but how cold it was it's hard to imagine, really, isn't it? So
I remember you saying before in an interview, I think you were talking about the types of people that come into the pub. There's maybe three types of people. So maybe tell us. Maybe tell us what those 3 types are.
There's people who see the name of the pub, come in, South Pollen, wonder what that place is, and then they come in and learn about Tom Crean. And you've got people that know a little bit about Tom Crean, or they're from Ireland, or they've heard something, and they've learned, their children are learning it and things like that. And then the third one's what I call the frozen beards, would be all the people that go to the Antarctic, who've been down there, who've experienced things and know the hardship that these men must have gone through, and just want to come and pay homage, really, to the man that was, and the person that, and the little village in Kerry that Tom Crean came back to. So it's
an incredible story. Listen, Gary, keep doing what you're doing. Here's to the next quarter of a century in the South Pole Inn, and sure, anyone passing through Annascaul, I'm sure, is welcome in.
Thank you very much. Yeah, anyone's welcome. Come and see us. Yeah.